Anything on your mind financially?
Paying the bills, man. Paying those student loans off as soon as possible so I can make completely unbiased decisions about my life and be free.
Ah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
That sounds good. Yeah, which is good. I think that's realistic this year. But yeah, that's kind of hyper. That's a little egocentric. That's what I'm thinking about financially.
Could we do a show about locum work or being an independent contractor as a physician?
We probably have not, although I have to say I haven't really done it yet. So it probably
Right.
would be good to put it on the back burner.
Okay.
I could talk about
Looking for locum work.
yeah, looking for locums work. Yeah, definitely. Looking for locums is highly dependent on your subspecialty. That's one thing I've learned. So I was talking to somebody the other day and they're like, hey, how's the job search going? Are you still thinking maybe start your own practice or whatever? And I was like, no, I'm kind of putting that on the back burner.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at locums. And I said, yeah, they're like, oh yeah, there's probably lots of those jobs. And well, it really depends. She knew somebody that was an anesthesiologist and they had done locums basically their entire life, 1099 all the time, hopping around.
Yeah.
And typically if you do it your whole career, you'll do like, you do end up doing longer stints too, like 9 years here, 10 years there. But regardless, in anesthesiology, it's a lot more common and it's sort of just in and out work already. But other clinical work, it's a bit less common. So just to characterize how many I've seen while keeping my ears open for opportunities over the last year, I've only seen like 6-ish come up. You know that they're really legitimate opportunities, especially if you signed up for like multiple locums companies. They'll all email you if there's one that's like really like broad or like really looking for something.
Yeah.
So if you're counting those plus like 1 or 2 extra, there's only been about 6 that I've seen for ophthalmology in the last year. So
Okay.
they're not incredibly common.
Is it more common in other specialties, do you think?
Yeah, it's just if you can plug in and out really easily, then it's fine. And then the more hospital-based it is, it seems like the more likely because they can credential you. Basically, they have to set you up to be able to get paid through the insurance. And they can kind of, I think, my understanding is that like a radiologist who's sitting in a dark room can just show up and work 8 to 5 or whatever, just read chest x-rays.
Mm-hmm.
And they can just filter. If you're not credentialed with all of them, you're at least going to be credentialed for Medicare, which a ton of people will have.
Oh, sure. So start you off with
They
that.
could have you just see those patients. They can filter that stuff.
Or I wonder if they could float you for a while until you get credentialed too.
There's some of that. They can, if you're seeing patients that you're not credentialed with, though, the hospital and you will not. Basically, they're paying you a daily rate, but they'll eat the cost of you interpreting things that you're not credentialed for. So maybe they'll eat the cost for that a little bit. Medicare is cool because you can get signed up pretty fast.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll backdate your payments up to like 3 months. So like if someone's opening their own practice, like the first one they can get oftentimes is Medicare.
Okay.
And maybe some private payers.
Mm-hmm.
But the private payers tend to take longer, like up to 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months, depending on certain parts of the country. Some parts are so bad as to say that you couldn't get it even within up to 12 months because they'll just like close off who they're willing to credential. So they'll have, I can't remember what that's called, but closed something. Yeah. So like you couldn't get it if you wanted to. And it's just like, we'll let you know when we're starting to bring in new providers. And you can't get on unless they open it back up. So
man, this is deja vu.
It's crazy.
When I was a therapist, I went through some of that because I had to get credentialed with insurance companies. And when I was doing it, there were a couple that were closed at the time to therapists and certain areas or whatever. And so I remember that. Yeah. And I remember getting, Medicare was pretty easy to see. There were a couple other, I never got credentialed with Blue Cross. I wasn't doing it that long, just 2 or 3 years, but I would have eventually, but it was just, it's like you didn't, and then you started getting enough patients through the other carriers. And it was just like, that was fine. I wasn't going to hustle too much on that, but yeah, I remember that process.
In Medicare, it depends, but they're pretty good about paying. I mean, and it's really the private payers that can be a little bit more difficult.
So when it comes to locum work, then I don't know when our listeners knew you were working, maybe not, but can you bring our listeners up to speed a little bit about what you've been doing? What's your mindset behind the locum work? Maybe how does it fit into your long-term goals, aspirations, like career trajectory?
Sure. Yeah. So I started looking at locums for the first time like a year ago. during coronavirus. I was in a practice that I knew wasn't a good fit. And I started looking to right now, at the time of recording, it's mid-April. And I was starting to look pretty much right around the same time a year ago. So I started looking in knowing that I kind of thought I knew what I wanted in the next practice. So I'm a young associate. And I knew some of the things I didn't want. And you kind of collect those a little bit easier than you collect what you do want. Like the things that you do want tend to be a little bit more vague.
Sure.
Is another thing that I've realized. So you do want like good ethics. You want to have patient priority. And these are not just like talking points. It's like legitimately like, what are you going to do this for if you're not doing it for a couple, those important reasons? It's foundational.
Right.
And then you want to also have a good business. If you're looking at private practice, you're looking at the business factor too, because that should be one of the reasons you're involved in private practice, or if there's not an academic place around. But academics will take care of so many of those details. If you don't really care how much you make, there's certainly an easier way to find the ethics and the quality of patient care, because you're going to have more resources at university too.
Absolutely.
So anyway, I was looking at locums because I thought it'd be good transitionary period to look at. Either I didn't know any of the ropes for building a practice and learning that. And I was just starting to read books and realizing like, holy smokes, there's like a lot that goes into this. Anybody who's in solo practice, like that's impressive. It's a lot to undertake just to get the ball rolling. And then you've got the stress and the pressure of succeeding or failing, or how am I going to find patients, and what's the timeline, knowing you're going to potentially even lose money for a year or two. It's such a significant decision. So I have so much respect for people that have done that. And because they've been through a lot, they have a lot to pass on, a lot that they've learned, and they enjoy sharing it with kind of the next generation. They really believe in that model. So kind of dug into that and was thinking, okay, solo is like the 6 month. It's like a 6 month runway from when you decide to do it. 6 months is a very safe amount. If you're really, really going after it, you can do it in like 4, maybe. So I was looking at locums as like a transitionary thing initially. And then I happened upon a different job opportunity, which was permanent and not necessarily in a place that I wanted to be long term, but seemed like a good simpatico kind of business approach, and heard about it. The connection was through former attending for my residency. So it came like with a good kind of thumbs up. And just over a period of time, it was clear that it was not going to probably be a good fit. And there's a couple of those things where that someone was looking for something different than they thought they were looking for when they hired you. And you just have to know that that's like part of it, and be like confident in yourself that part of what you're looking for, someone else is also looking for something when they hire you. And you can't know, just like I didn't exactly know what I was looking for in this second job out of residency.
Right.
Some people, when they hire you, they also kind of don't know what they're looking for or what they want out of the end of their career. I found myself on a similar path as many other associates, where you got hired in and you find someone was kind of planning on retiring in the near future, and that's kind of the language of it, and looking for a partner very soon. And then there's things you find along the way. Maybe you find that someone had been there for a while and wasn't made partner, or someone was there temporarily and moved along and you didn't know about them before. Those are the kinds of things that, when you talk about a contract or negotiate about a job, you want to ask about those very thoroughly.
Right.
You can go on websites actually and look at backdated versions of websites and find people who have been in the practice on the website. That was nice. I skipped one opportunity because of finding that. But yeah, so these are the different things that happen. And so anyways, I was in this other position for a short period of time, really about 6 months, and just wasn't a good fit for a number of reasons. And it's one of those things like, you have to be careful how you talk about things when you've been in a job. And I do advise people, know your reasons, but be as positive as you can about them. And no future employer wants to hear, negative things when you're interviewing at your next jobs.
That's absolutely true.
You've got to just be positive. You got to know your worth, and you don't have to, you're not worth more by putting down somebody else. Just basic stuff, which is challenging to do when you are, you've been driven your whole life and you've been successful in, becoming a doctor and getting good grades and getting a residency that you wanted and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, you can interview well. You can have had, a couple job opportunities that you didn't think were great from the start. And that's okay. People are not going to, you're not going to lose opportunities for the future. So, I picture myself at any point in the last year, if somebody would have come along and said, how's the job going? Do you like it? Do you not like it? What are your thoughts? It'd be that person or that my former self, like, hey, you're going to do a great job somewhere else. If you don't think it's a good fit, get going, get looking for something else. There's no sense in hanging on to something that you feel like is not a good fit because there's so many practices out there.
Yeah.
And if you just want to take good care of patients, you're going to find a place where you can do that and not be stressed out, not feel like you're kind of bending your care plan towards a certain mentality or efficiency or cost effectiveness.
At what point should someone look and say, okay, either this is not a good fit or this is pretty good. I just need to, there's something in me that I need to come to terms with or adjust, or, like, how do you
I
recognize
agree.
that?
Totally. I'm somebody who looks at themselves in the mirror and really thinks like, okay, what can I be doing differently too?
Yeah.
I think one thing you can do, if you find yourself in a position where you're not enjoying your job, don't make any rash decisions. Number one.
Yeah.
I'd say the first thing you want to do is talk to a couple mentors. If you feel like there's some things that are conflicting with you internally, you're having that mental stress of like, I don't know if this is quite the right thing, or I feel like I'm not being allowed to practice in the way that keeps my patients safe, or whatever it might be, you should talk to someone who's a co-resident or a colleague or an attending and just have a confidential discussion and just say, hey, hypothetically, if I found myself in this scenario, what would you think about that? Like, I feel uncomfortable with it, but I just came out of residency and maybe I don't really know how the real world is. And can you reassure me? Or is this something that should be a hang up for me? I should talk to my boss about. That's the real world. You start to have these conversations with your employer that are kind of uncomfortable or make you nervous. But if you can have them in a respectful, responsible manner, it's well thought out, you're not firing off multiple emails. I mean, if you're doing a lot of your discussion about this kind of stuff over email, do not expect to be there long.
It's not going to go well.
Like,
yep, absolutely.
That is not how you make any sort of resolution to really anything. So
yeah, that's good advice. Just for, that's general advice to anybody in the 2000s. Now that we're in this century, like, don't have emotional conversations over text or email. Have it verbally.
Even I would say, like, don't have any important conversations at all. If something's a pain point for you, do not have that discussion over email. I made this mistake.
Yeah.
And I was really fortunate because my first position, the president of the group, is a pretty big group. He would just come in and say, like, hey, like, I know you're new, you're just out of residency, you clearly are driven, you want to make things better. Don't do it over email. And that was like such a great tip, because I was just like, here I am, like, ambitious, well-intentioned. I'm like writing this long email and I'm thinking, man, I'm getting all my thoughts out perfectly. Like,
this is going to be received so well. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, oh man, they're going to be like so glad they hired me. And I was just like, totally, I didn't know 12 other, ophthalmologists. I didn't know, they're going to all read one email and potentially each person could take it differently rather than just, having a conversation. I think that that's something that most people wouldn't do. So it's probably like not advice that everybody needs, but I would just say the overarching thing for me, like I like to have action points because it's just easier. Like, it's just more tangible. Like, here's my rule so that I really want to feel good about my work and about my ethics and about my patient care. So I can easily prioritize the urgency and importance of that above like the efficacy of my communication. And that's probably a lot of doctors, I would guess. I know that's probably why a lot of doctors butt heads with administration in hospitals, and you hear that a lot.
Yeah.
So anyways, no email for important conversations, maybe an email to set something up to chat about it. That's been one of my big takeaways.
Yep.
Yeah, but it goes both ways, so in terms of working on things, I have talked to a coach before, which I found was really helpful.
Okay.
A lot of people do that. It's kind of becoming a thing now. You probably
Yeah, it
noticed
kind of
in the
is.
financial space.
You'll see it with the physician philosopher and others like that
Yep.
in the arena that are offering coaching. Did you speak to someone that was physician specific?
Yeah. So I found it incredibly helpful to talk to someone who was a physician
Okay.
who had experienced burnout. I've definitely experienced burnout. It's helpful to have a little bit of that commiseration, but you're like, okay, the person I was talking to, she gets it, like
Yeah.
she really loves people. She really loves medicine and she was not enjoying it. She also was just not vibing, like the fit she had with her job was not good.
Yeah.
She didn't feel like the priorities lined up. And so she made a shift and now she loves it and she
Hmm.
doesn't do it many hours, and she kind of figured out like, what do I need to want to keep doing this? My story was, is different than hers, but the same principles come across.
Is that somebody you think you can recommend that we could put a link like in the show notes?
Oh, totally. Let me
Okay.
look up her name real quick. I just got an email from her. She puts out great stuff. Erin Wiseman is her name.
Okay.
She has a course called Burnt Out to Badass.
Ah.
I haven't done that. She
Hmm.
came out with that after I just did a few sessions with her a couple of years ago,
Okay.
and that was incredibly helpful. I mean,
Hmm.
so you don't have to plan on shelling out like thousands of dollars for a year or whatever it is. I just did a few, and it was just like really helped me hone in on my priorities, like what I wanted, what I'm looking for. I mean, kind of a long roundabout for talking about locums, but I mean, hopefully, if even if anyone just listens to this and is just like, oh, cool, like there's other doctors that thought they knew what they wanted,
Right.
pride themselves on knowing what they want, that didn't know what they want, and they're looking for something different. So yeah, part of what I'm looking for with locums is to try something different and see if maybe I like that version of medicine a little bit better. And then it provides the flexibility to keep learning about solo practice. It's also a nice like try before you buy for practices. So it's sort of a non-committal, less committal, almost like more like dating rather than getting engaged right off the bat for starting a new job. Because you can't know what the practice is like. You can't really know what the flow of patients is like, whether the doctor is going to share with you just the Medicare or going to share with you the premium patients. Like there's a lot of these things that can happen that can really change the dynamic of what you think you're getting.
Sure.
And the locums really is a great way. Like if I had a solo practice, I would love to hire somebody and it's a 1099 to start.
Yeah, I can see
And
that.
then,
Sure.
and I like it, then boom, let's like mutually get more serious about the job now that we know we're good to go. And now it hasn't cost the practice or the hospital as much money. And it hasn't cost them, maybe all of their time or them moving themselves or their family or something
Yeah.
like that. So to me, it's almost like if you're going to go like first principles thinking like, how would I want to hire somebody to feel something out? Because we're expensive. It's a huge cost. You
Yeah.
sign a full at least 1 year contract for a set amount, no matter how
Yeah.
good or bad somebody is.
Hmm.
It seems like an awesome way to hire. So I'm liking it just because it seems like it's almost like if you're dating somebody and now you feel like you're on the same page,
Yeah.
like you're both taking it as
Sure. You're
slow as
friends
you
first
want
and
to.
then you yeah, take it to the next level and yeah.
So to me, it just feels like a really the most sort of intelligent, responsible way of looking at a new position. So
Yeah.
I'm excited about that.
No, I think that's awesome. And so it's for you, it kind of started out as, I got to get out of here. I know I don't necessarily want this. I think I want to have my own practice at some point. Let's go for this kind of locums part time, but still, is it the kind of money you said you're going to be doing what you're looking at right now? There's a job that's looking at 7 to 10 days a month, you said?
Yeah, that's right. So that's what I'm looking for. I mean, one thing that's cool about medicine in general, I mean, it's got the pros and cons, right? But if you are in rural America, you tend to get paid more. Payer mix is either higher or there's just almost always you get paid a little bit more
Oh,
per
for sure.
patient.
We've always thought it was like federal grants to some of these underserved areas can boost a lot of that or something.
There are some of those programs, but it's mostly that there's a different multiple that Medicare pays based on
Ah,
location.
Huh. Okay.
It's supposed to kind of be related to living costs, I think, and I'm not really sure exactly, but it has to do with that multiple, at least for the government program.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's certain pockets of the country too that have like really good pension programs.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them might be in rural areas, so that can be helpful too. But anyways, that's they call that geographic arbitrage,
Yeah.
and you can work in a remote area and then do locums, and you can make pretty good money. I know, especially like if you're a radiologist and anesthesia and things like that, it can be really pretty easy to find a position,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can work in places that are as necessarily not going to attract as many people, and then they'll kind of pay you a little bit more just because they need radiology. And even though they're not quite making as much, maybe an average doctor at a hospital might make like 100 grand off them a year or
Yeah.
more essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they'll just eat that cost because they need a radiologist, and then they're going to make it
Yeah.
up in
They
an
know it'll
ER.
bring in more people eventually.
All that to say, you can make a little bit more money in certain areas, and there's a huge range for what they pay per day in ophthalmology. That was kind of an interesting
Oh,
thing.
really?
And you can negotiate, but you're kind of like competing with other people for a limited number of positions. So you don't want to drive too hard of a bargain, or else they're just going to take guy number two for hundreds of dollars less per day, potentially, if they're really price driven.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's varying amounts. Like,
Okay.
I think you can look at how much doctors make and compare the different subspecialties, and
Mm-hmm.
clearly some more than others.
Mm-hmm.
But it is interesting to break that down all the way to a daily rate. And when you're looking at locums, you're looking at a daily rate of what that doctor will get paid for the work that they do.
Okay.
And then you have to include the fact that if you're working with a locums agency, they're going to get paid too at some sort of rate, either for the contract duration, or I'm sure there's a few ways to do it. And then they're going to pay for your travel, for your lodging, and for your car as well. So your rental car. So flights, rental car, and lodging. And I don't know if any of that pay for food, but certainly some hospitals have, free cafeterias and stuff. Yeah. So they're paying your daily rate plus all of that. So you already know that the hospital somehow is making more hiring you.
Yeah.
Most positions they're not going to lose on average, generally, right? Because they can't on average. So they're paying somebody else to find you and all of your travel expenses. So
Yeah.
I talked to a radiologist who he started hunting around. He's been doing this for 25 years or so. He started hunting around. Yeah, just purely locums. He started hunting around for his own locums work, not using an agency, and just calling hospitals or making friends that are radiologists and asking around.
Mm-hmm.
When you do that, you can cut out the middleman and meet in the middle.
Okay. So your per day rate's going to be higher.
Your per day rate is going to be higher. And like, what could be better than like increasing your per day rate? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's like a lawyer charging more per hour, like a substantial amount
for the
more.
same work. Yeah.
For the same work, you're already going to be doing the work. It's just it's an interesting way of thinking about a raise in a different way.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's something I have attempted a little bit. I think it's hard for ophthalmology, but if I was a radiologist, I would not be using a recruiter. If I was an anesthesiologist, I would not be using a recruiter, and certainly other high-paying subspecialists.
Yeah.
Like if I was a dermatologist and I did like Mohs, and I was just graduating, and I didn't care where I lived, and I wanted to be somewhere I was okay with being there for 2 to 5 years. You could definitely find a hospital that doesn't have a Mohs surgeon.
Yeah.
And just call them and say, hey, would you support me in my first couple of years? And you could make your own deal. I mean, residents and fellows that are graduating right now that aren't doing that. I know it's busy. I know it's stressful, but if you go and do that, holy smokes, I can't imagine how much more you would make in your first or second year, just being basically a free agent instead of being drafted.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it would be loads of money for those people. We're talking like easily $100,000 raise just from looking around and finding your own thing.
Yeah, I wonder if that's because again, we have residents that their main financial goal before they talk to us, and sometimes even afterwards, is that they want to pay off their student loans first, no matter what, before they really invest. And that's certainly, if they want to front load that before they really settle on their final job, or maybe they want to do that before they have kids, or whatever the case might be. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a good time to do that. Maybe you can aggressively pay down loans with that extra 100,000 a few years
Oh yeah.
sooner.
I mean, some of them, when I'm saying 50 to 100,000, that might be part of the daily rate. It might be part of whatever. If you're doing locums, they don't really do signing bonuses, but
Yeah.
you could call, the world is your oyster. You can call places and just say, hey, and this is one thing I learned is you have to know who to ask for, right? So this is like the tip of the podcast here.
Mhm.
Ask for the physician recruiter. You can just call the hospital. I feel like I'm giving away the secret sauce here, but you can call the hospital. And I love, me, I love just like cold calling and talking to
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Call the hospital. It doesn't matter. Talk to their operator. Say, hey, would you mind transferring me to administration?
Mhm.
They'll transfer you to admin. Someone in admin is going to know who the physician recruiter is.
Yeah.
And if they don't outsource that, then, fully 100%, if they have somebody that fits that type of role a little bit or some similar name, that person will love that you went straight to them rather than using a recruiter because they save money too and they look
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
So you're helping whatever hospital you're calling, the person who hires you and brings you to everybody else, you're making them look good. I mean, that's a great way to get a job right there.
Mhm.
And those people they're physician recruiters, so they're also like the nicest people ever.
Oh, I'm
They're
sure.
like they're always like bubbly and like they're like, oh, let me take down your email and blah blah blah, and we'll let you
Right.
know. And let me talk to so and so, and I'll give you a call back. And they're like actually responsive to emails because that's what they do. I don't know. That's if I was talking to residents, I would just say, man, like, do yourself a favor, like, pick a state and just start calling hospitals and talk to their physician recruiters and see what you can find out because doctors can do this stuff and it's not that difficult. And yeah, there's so many resources for contract negotiation now too. These paid services where they really do, they look at so many contracts. You could start setting yourself up for your own thing and you're like, oh, I don't know if this is even going to be a good deal or am I making up? You just pay like under $1,000 and get an expert review.
Okay.
And now so now you've done it yourself. It's like selling your own home.
Mhm.
So for sale by owner is like such a great way to sell your
Good
house.
learning
Like,
experience. Yeah.
yeah, the buyer's agent will basically do all the work for you
That's true.
because they want the sale or else they don't get any percentage. So if somebody brings you a buyer, then you don't even have to do any work.
Yeah.
Or if you find somebody else who doesn't want to use an agent, you can just figure out what deal you want to make and then go to a lawyer and they write it up and it costs you like $1,500
Yeah.
instead of 6-7% of the total worth of your house.
Right.
So there's
Totally.
just these like big moments where you can, kind of buck up and do your own work and then pay an expert to make sure you're not being an idiot.
Yeah.
And you're going to clean up 6 figures pretty easily. And for a lot of people, you're halfway done with your student loans at that point.
Yeah, exactly. So going about the process of finding it once you connect with some, tell us about the interview process. Is it different than a typical interview process?
It is different. I would encourage people to interview just as seriously as you would for a normal interview. So like right now I didn't shave really. You can see this is my preferred kind of look, but
Yeah.
generally I don't normally have, maybe half this or something.
Uh-huh.
But if I'm interviewing on a Zoom call for a locums, which
Yeah.
you pretty much always are, I would shave. I would wear like a dress shirt, maybe even a suit coat jacket over top. So
Okay.
take it seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Assume they haven't read your resume. I think on at least one interview, I was just kind of thinking they were going to take it as seriously as I was taking it. And I found that they didn't really. I interviewed with somebody and then within an hour, I got an email from the locums person, my agent, and he was like, hey, what about this part of your resume? Hey, what about this part of your resume? And I was like, I literally just got off the phone with them 45 minutes ago. Why didn't they ask me? I thought that was the point of the interview,
Sure.
It was just funny. I don't know if it was a lack
Or
of
the point of a
organization.
resume. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was just kind of funny. I was like, oh yeah, like I'll totally, I wrote, here's my answer. Happy to hop on a call if they want to need clarification. But yeah, so just kind of assume they don't know, give your story, kind of tell them what you're looking for. And then I've been reading this book, and I haven't talked about this with you, but it's called Business Made Simple. Oh, let me see
Okay.
if it'll, there we go.
Yep.
Business Made Simple. And it's by Donald Miller. I love his stuff. He's kind of like a marketing guy. He used
Yes, the story brand.
Yeah, story brand guy. Yeah, so he's written a lot of just books about his own life, and then he really got into marketing maybe up to 10 years ago now, and good stuff. But he wrote this book, and it's sort of like a 60-day going through business principles. But the first like week or two is really just on your own personal development and talking about character and your values and like what are the things that matter to you that like set you apart.
Yeah.
And when you develop those and they're like solidified in your mind, it's sort of like knowing your strengths. There's always a classic like, what are your strengths? What are 3 strengths and 3 weaknesses or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
And just knowing like yourself on the level of your character and your story, and being able to communicate your story in a transparent but still very positive way. Like no matter what, like when somebody says 3 strengths and 3 weaknesses, you don't tell them, well, I'm terrible at time management and I never get anything done. And do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
those are not like the types of things that you would say on an interview.
Yep.
You wouldn't say like, I've been late, sorry I was late to this interview. Yeah, all my friends tease me about being late or whatever it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you don't tell them the like worst things. You want to give them the best foot forward, still be honest, still be transparent. But this book I think is really cool because it helps you prioritize like real things that make a difference, that like enhance your leadership skills. And
I'll have to check that out. Great. That's sweet. We'll put a link in the show notes to that. That's
yeah. So it's really good. I've enjoyed it. I'm about like 3 weeks into it, and they're really short. It's kind of book you read it and you're like, I knew that, but now it's organized and it like you get that like mental framework.
Yep. Good. So you go through the interview, take it seriously, even though they may not necessarily appear to or read your resume beforehand. So when you get a job offer from somewhere, what does that look like typically? What are some different things about that with Locum?
Yeah, for locums, that is different. So you get an offer. Basically, you just get a mess. If you work with a recruiter, you just kind of get like a message like, hey, they're like good to go to move forward. And you're like, okay, cool. I haven't done this before. What does that mean?
You're like, oh, shoot. I mean,
and they're basically like, well, we got to get you licensed in the state.
Yep.
And that can take however long. This is a cool thing. Now they have something called a letter of qualification. And you can apply for this letter. You apply actually within your own state, but you use a interstate medical licensing something, IMLCC credentialing center or something.
Okay.
IMLCC.com, I think is the website.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, you pay pretty decent amount of money. I think it's $700 or $800.
Mm-hmm.
And the state that you're in verifies, okay, yeah, like you're good to go. You have no malpractice claims. You have no background issues. You do like a fingerprinting. They give you a letter, and then you can, with they have like an agreement or a compact with like 30-ish states in the US. So mostly Midwest, Northern, and Eastern states.
Okay.
You can like get a license within 10 days is kind of like long, but they can get them usually within 48 hours. And that tends to be a rate limiting step for a lot of states with getting credentialed. So the locums agency, if it's a good one, they'll pay for that. So you don't have to do it yourself.
Yep.
You just have an out-of-pocket expense, and you maybe do or don't get a position. And then you get the state license, and they kind of like walk you through it, sort of. It's, if anyone has applied to a hospital for credentialing, typically it's like, oh yeah, we'll help you with all this, we'll take care of it. And then some hospitals will like fill out everything for you. You'll send them a resume, they'll fill it all out, and you just kind of look it over and sign. And then some hospitals will be like, we'll take care of it all for you. And they send you a link and a code to log in, and then you have to fill out like everything yourself. It sounds like a silly thing to complain about, but if you move to a big city, you're doing like 4 or 5 of these, it's a lot. Like it's one of those things that like solo doctors, they spend a lot of their time on paperwork because they don't have somebody who does it for them. So anyways, they'll kind of help you with that. They make sure you have it all done, but you still have to be sitting down signing PDFs like every other day for a month or so. Getting a home loan, they're like, don't worry, we just need 3 documents from you.
The last one.
You've gotten a home before? Yeah, this is the last one.
Yeah.
Every day for 30 days. You know what I mean? So it's not quite as bad as like the like Quicken Loans home loan process or something.
Yeah.
It still ends up being, it's always like one more thing, and can we get a little more detail on this, or that date doesn't line up with that, and you're like, oh, it turns out it was a typo, or something. So that's kind of the process. So they kind of give you just like a thumbs up, and then you just start the credentialing process just like you would with a regular job. The big difference is your 1099, they do cover your malpractice and with your tail, so you don't have to pay like $5,000, $10,000 at the end of the contract. It's just all included, capped off, specific to that location. So you can't locums one place and then start doing another one, or like range your own or work in your practice and have that malpractice cover you. It just covers your job there.
Yep.
I read all my contracts. I read them very thoroughly myself. I would encourage all doctors to do that. It's kind of a headache. It's kind of a pain. You feel like you don't know what you're reading. You read it once. If you feel like it was confusing, take a day off, read it again. Yep. It's set in plain English because it has to be pretty easily understandable by all parties.
Right.
To hold up in a court of law. So like if you're a doctor and you read it twice, you're going to understand it. You're not going to know what you don't know. But if it's a hospital system, a lot of people have signed it, and then you can get a contract person to review it or a lawyer to review it. It shouldn't cost more than $1,000. Yeah. Anyways, that's kind of been my process. Okay. And then don't be afraid to hunt around. Don't be afraid to turn things down. Just because you're doing locum doesn't mean you have to take the first thing that comes along.
Good point.
I've turned down 3-4 opportunities that I'm sure I would have gotten if I would have taken their stated like introductory rate, daily rate. And I was just like, that's just not enough for me to want to fly out and do this and that. And, the hospital's going to try to get the lowest amount. And if you're not getting paid for call and you're going to take call, like that's kind of crazy. Like I would definitely get paid for call. You're giving up your time, even though you're there just for the job potentially if you're traveling for it.
Yeah.
I don't know, value your time. It's hard to do when you're looking for something, but just know your worth, value your time. You're going to find a job that you like, and it might be from that locums job and it might not be, but find something that really compensates you at a level that you think is reasonable. I have one other thought on the finance part. I would also recommend just doing some simple math on what you get paid if you were getting paid for a permanent position there. Yeah. So keep in mind, you're going to have travel days on each end.
Okay.
And so you're really losing a couple days potentially, depending on how far you have to go. So if you're working 7 days, let's say you get paid the same amount. So let's say you get paid, and this would be on a low, but let's say you get $1,500 and you work 7 days, the same rate, and it might be less on weekends, if you're not seeing patients. That'd be $10,500.
Okay.
So, and you've lost 2 days, so the travel time back and forth ish, especially if there's a time change or something. But let's just say you worked that job permanently and you were there $10,500 for 7 days, and you multiply that by 4. So that's $42,000 a month, multiplied by 12 months, and then that'd be $500,000. Okay, so that's like really good, right? $500,000. But really, you wouldn't work that much, and they're kind of paying you for the time of the travel. And $1,500 is pretty good for ophthalmology potentially. Yeah, and you wouldn't be getting paid for those weekend days. So if you're getting paid like $400, $450, and you're traveling to somewhere that's not cream of the crop location, it's not Chicago or Denver or LA or something. Yeah. You're getting paid pretty well for that time. But, if you cut out some of those days and then you're down like 20%, you're at like $350,000, $400,000. If you take a job for $300,000 in a city that you like better, and you're okay working permanently and for somebody else, and all that stuff lines up, or you find the perfect practice and whatever. Is it worth an extra $50,000 potential amount? You just have to kind of weigh that out. So I like to look at it both on a daily rate and like I'm traveling and losing a little bit of time perspective. And then I look at it from like an annual rate too, because you don't know how to price out like how much is my daily rate worth, because most doctors have never thought about that before.
No, it's true. Yeah.
So if you're switching, you can take your current salary and then divide it down for just if you're going to just work weekdays, you can divide it down and just look at that. But if you're going to work 14 days and then they're not going to pay you for the weekend in between, you're kind of like losing some time. So you just have to look at all those factors, and it ends up being simple multiplication most of the time, and just remembering to factor in, oh, I would have taken vacation. So, really you'd want to multiply that by like 10 months because you probably would have taken 4 to 8 weeks of vacation. So that would be 400,000. So you're like, okay, this $1,500 per day rate makes pretty good sense, but $1,200 per day definitely does not.
Yeah.
That's kind of like, you could find a part-time job in a city or in a lot of different places potentially and make 200,000 per year. It's just an attempt to compare apples to apples.
Yep. No, definitely. I think which goes back to the, don't necessarily jump at it right away. You don't always have to take the first job, take your time, both getting a job and leaving a job, which again, this is true in investing or job choices or anything, but don't base any decisions on any one point in time. It's patience is power is what I tell my kids.
Totally. Yeah. Unless you're in like a horrendous scenario that you just have to get out of.
Sure. There's the exception to that. Yeah.
Those definitely exist in medicine. So I would never judge anybody who departed from something quickly, just knowing that those scenarios happen. There's personal things that happen. People have to step away for whatever.
Yep.
But really 3 months, 6 months, like you might know at like 1 month, but you can wait another month. And then you're going to start looking, and it's going to take you, most of the time, it's going to take you a good 3 months to find something, especially sorting out between a few good opportunities to find the great opportunity.
Yeah. So if it's not a big hurry or urgent, try to save up some cash for that gap.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's one of the reasons you want to have an emergency fund of at least 3 months.
Totally true. Okay. Well, I think that's about our time for today. I think that was super helpful. We got some great stuff out of that. Hopefully there's things that listeners can take, whether they take action on it now, whether they never do anything with locums, whether they're thinking about it or they can use it in the future. This is going to be a great resource, and really appreciate your time and letting us learn from your experiences instead of having to learn the hard way.
Totally. Happy to help. Yeah. If anybody has any questions, they can email me at tsmith@financialmd.com. Or my other email is trevorsmithmd@gmail.com. I'm happy to reply, and just personal level or professional level. If you have any questions, happy to chat with you. So
awesome. All right. Well, everyone, we'll see you next time on our next episode. In the meantime, be sure to get out to the Financial MD community. That's the Facebook group that's specifically designed for physicians by physicians to ask questions, to start some conversations. We post articles and tips and things there. Get out to our YouTube channel, subscribe to our weekly didactic minute video where we put out little 2-minute tips of personal finance things that pertain to you as physicians. Other than that, we'll see you next time on the Financial MD Show.
Awesome. Thanks, John.